Good day, everyone. I'd like to welcome you back to Virtue and Vice. Today, I'd like to consider with you an area that I think there's some virtue in, but there's also a lot of vice in, and that's the whole area of deconstruction or deconstructionism, and particularly Christian deconstructionism. So, what is it? Christian deconstructionism. A basic definition, I'll just pull it up, and people describe it in different ways, but it has certain tenets. And this definition is Christian deconstruction, also known as faith destruction, is a process where Christians reevaluate their faith and may abandon previously held beliefs. Well, I think Christianity, many of us as Christians, I claim to be a Christian, we go through a process many times of deconstruction. Many of us have had former beliefs that we've had to come to grips with and recognize that perhaps they're toxic and we need to deconstruct them. But my concern of this area goes beyond that. And again, I think I would agree with some aspects of deconstructionism. Derrida is the philosopher that originally came up with the philosophical concept of deconstructionism. And my main issue with him, and I think many philosophers would have, as well as theologians, that is, Derrida, he does a good job of describing how we deconstruct, but he has no better alternative. There's nothing better. It's just a philosophy that goes nowhere. It simply deconstructs. So, as we deconstruct religion, again, I believe there are some aspects of it that perhaps need to be deconstructed. For instance, when churches or uh, preachers use guilt to manipulate people or greed to manipulate people. When Christianity has many isms that are brought into it, different isms like fundamentalism and racism and colonialism and Zionism. We could go in a lot of different areas where it turns into an ism, a belief where someone looks at things as if you don't belong to this ism, you're an outsider. You have to subscribe to our ism. And many describe that as tribalism. You are either in our group or you're out of it. And this is what you have to hold to be in our group. Well, anyway, there's aspects of deconstructionism that perhaps are good. But again, what is replacing it? And there's another aspect to this that I think I watched some YouTube videos on deconstructionism. And again, the only thing that many of these speakers, these experts, can do is deconstruct certain things. They have nothing better than to say, well, you need to have a syllogism in your mind and come up with your own conclusions using your mind. But in essence, what it does, it's just another form of existentialism. It's where we put our authority in our own minds and we reject any kind of authority outside of our own minds. Uh, it was Husserl that said something about He bemoaned the fact that we've lost a meta narrative, and that's certainly true today. There's no meta narrative. There's no sense of authority or morals that go beyond my own individual puny thinking. You see, it can be somewhat exhilarating for people to step into this realm of deconstruction, because what they're doing is basically saying no one else is going to tell me what my morals ought to be, including God or the Bible or the church or anyone else. I will determine on my own what my values will be. And it can kind of be like, the first time when you were a child, you said the four-letter word. You knew your parents weren't going to approve of that, but you snuck it in there every once in a while, and you used that four-letter word. Or the first time, maybe you were a little bit older, that you actually smoked a joint. You felt like I was able to toss aside the morals and I did it my way. I just did my thing. Or maybe the first time you had a sexual experience, or maybe you went skinny dipping and you bared it all. It's liberating, it's exhilarating. And the first time that someone says, I don't believe in God. Well, man, that's something. And we have a pop culture that's based around that. No real basis for saying that other than what's contrived in their own mind. Um, Let me suggest something to you. Every human being has faith. You believe in something, you trust in something, and you're either trusting simply what goes on in your puny mind, or you're trusting something also that maybe goes beyond yourself, your own puny mind, because you recognize that there's more to life, there's more to the realm that we live beyond myself and my puny thinking. But the whole basis of deconstructionism has faith, but that faith is not on what's outside of myself. That faith is totally in myself. I will determine what's right and wrong. I will determine whether there's a God or not. And people are flocking to people who are saying all kinds of things out of ignorance in this area, as if it's virtuous. I'm the virtuous one because I believe in reason, only reason. No, you don't. You have a faith. You believe in something, you trust in something, and you're trusting in your own mind. You're not trusting beyond yourself. Let me give a word of encouragement to deconstructionism. You deconstructionist, you're going to probably have a time in your life. You see this? It's called gray hair. And many that I've seen on YouTube, you don't have much of that yet. You haven't had a lot of experience in life. But you're probably going to experience something in your life where you're going to hit bottom one day. And you're going to look in your mind in the syllogisms, and you're going to try to find ultimate meaning in yourself. And it won't be there. You're going to try to find something that will help draw you out of this, but it's not in your mind. It's not in your power. You'll begin to recognize there's something that I'm missing here. It's kind of like the pit, the well that Jeremiah was in. People many times have to hit bottom, the bottom of the well, before they begin to recognize they need something beyond themselves. and that their faith simply in self was misdirected, and they need something more than that. Jeremiah, he was in the pit of the well. He was in the mire, and he sunk down into it. And you may get to a place where you will be in that mire, and you'll work through your syllogisms, you'll work through your reason, you'll work through your Freudian psychology, and you'll work through these things, and you'll still be empty, and there won't be an answer to what you're struggling with. It's like an alcoholic. Many alcoholics realize they don't have it in and of themselves to get beyond that pit of alcoholism. So what do? They begin to look beyond themselves. They begin to acknowledge, well, there may be a power beyond myself that I need help with. It's in the bottom of that pit. And many times it's the pit of suffering. It's the pit of despair that you can find God. God can be there. Because when you come to the end of yourself, that's where you find God. It's like Elijah when he was running from Jezebel, who wanted to kill him. She threatened to kill him because he called a famine on the land, and she was out to get him. And he fled to Mount Horeb. And while he was at Horeb, God came to him. God came to him in an earthquake and in a mighty wind and a fire. But in those things, he didn't hear the voice of God. But he heard the voice of God in the still voice. That's where he found God. Jeremiah looked up for help from the bottom of the pit. You see, it's that still small voice that we hear, the voice of God. When we quiet our hearts, when in our minds we realize all this rationale I have in the mind isn't good enough, and we look for something beyond ourselves, and that's when we begin to find God. You see, God, he's in two places. He's in that stillness. He's in the stillness of your soul, in the depth of your being. His spirit permeates to the depth of our being, and he knows our thoughts even before we think them. That's where God is. But he's also way beyond that, way beyond our understanding. He's transcendent. He's intimate. He's transcendent. That's who God is. And many times when we come to the end of ourselves, we begin to hear that voice. He's alive. For those of you who are involved in just throwing out beliefs, right and left, and belief in God too, don't be surprised if something happens to you that is very, very difficult, that you can't handle on your own. Some suffering, some malady, something that happens that no matter how much you rationalize, no matter how much you depend on your own strength, you can't get out of it. You won't have the help of Nietzsche. You see, Nietzsche, he's the patron saint of deconstructionism. Nietzsche is the philosopher that said in his life, he was raised, he had a pastor for a father and a religious home. He deconstructed all of his life. And finally he said, well, God is dead. God is dead. He doesn't exist. God is dead. You see, in that pit, You may hear that voice of Nietzsche. God is dead. But what did Nietzsche do? Nietzsche killed himself. He was in utter despair. You see, that's the alternative. When you hit that spot, when you hit that pit to such a degree, and you come to the end of yourself, all there is total despair. Don't be like Nietzsche. Listen to that still small voice, a voice from God who says, I love you. I care for you. I can help draw you out of this pit. You can experience freedom. You can begin to experience that I'm your friend. I'm your best friend. I hope you don't chuck that God. He's the one that loves you so much that he died for you. And he's alive. Thank you very much.